What is up, guys? Chris Fluck here. Chris Fluck Podcast, episode 31. Today we're looking at Complete. We're going to give a little bit of review on the Complete Youth Training put out by Athletes Acceleration, a company that I go to for a lot of continuing education work and research, I guess you could call it. So Complete Youth Training by Mike Boyle. Mike Boyle is this guy up in the Northeast. You know, he's worked with Boston Bruins, Boston University hockey teams, USA Women's Hockey, Boston Red Sox. He's got himself a World Series ring, got himself Olympic gold medals. Probably did a little bit of work in the NBA. He's dubbed as the guy that invented combine training. He doesn't really think that's true, but it says it in a book, so it must be true. Is kind of how he says it. But anyhow, you know, he trained Mike Boyle for all you Philadelphia Eagles fans. You know, you remember this guy. They used to train right down the road here in Bethlehem, literally 3 minutes away. Mike Boyle is at Boston College. He tears up the NFL combine. He's a big dude. He's probably 255 plus, defensive end. Could run like a deer, jump, all this other stuff. Didn't quite perform up to the standards that the Philadelphia Eagles were hoping. But anyway, Mike Boyle trained him. Mike Boyle developed him for the combine. He didn't develop him to be the greatest NFL player of all time. He just prepared this man to be the best, to do the best that he could on test day. And Mamula did it. And then from there, it kind of steamrolled into a bigger area. Now it's huge and it's a big business and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, Mike Boyle gets credit for that. You know, dealing with the youth, tons of stuff to talk about. The whole 10,000 hours of practice, select teams, playing multiple sports. When should a kid start? How often should a kid strength train? Should he play a sport, he or she play a sport year round? Is what we're doing here in America the right way to go about things in terms of the amount of games we have relative to the amount of practices we have? Are we getting enough physical training in schools and how that affects kids' development overall? All of this stuff he gets talked about. So, I mean, we're just going to start diving right into this now. And Mike Boyle's opinion here, you know, the purpose of sport, there's two big things here. They want to teach life lessons in a forgiving environment where, you know, it's not life or death. They're just games and you're just playing stuff and you're exploring new things. The second part of it is that when you get into the workforce, do what you did as an athlete and you'll be fine. That's some of the positives and some of the purpose of sport, where if you could apply those things like the hard work, the practice, the teamwork, camaraderie, and all that stuff, if you could apply that stuff as an adult that you did growing up as a youth, you're probably going to be pretty successful. Now, in regards to what we're doing here in America, and probably in other countries too, but I'm only speaking because this is where I live. You know, he cites a quote, 1984, this was written, not from the book, in the year 1984. Inappropriate application of a win-oriented model. That wasn't George Orwell saying that. That was a quote in 1984 about the current state of sports, which is now 35 years ago that this was written, and it's only gotten worse. Kids play more games. They have longer schedules than the pros. You start looking at, you know, a kid could play more baseball games in a year than an MLB player can, depending on how many. That's not a great example. 162 games is too many. He used hockey as his example because that's the sport that he's involved with. Kids could play more hockey games in the year than the NHL guys. NHL is playing in the 80-some games. Same with the NBA. Kids are playing more games in basketball as a youth with AAU, travel ball, all that stuff than the NBA guys do. NBA players shut it down, say, for a month or two and just kind of rest and recover. Kids are just going at it all year round. And the shift that I think we need to make, you know, you want to start talking about having a cultural shift. You know, the focus shouldn't be about kind of keeping up with everybody else, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. And we should worry less about childhood achievement and more about developing long-term players or athletes. So I think this applies to everything with kids. It's not about where you are at age 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's about where you are at 6, 18, 20, 22, 24, 30, 40, 50. Some of these things that he talks about, the purpose of sport, these lessons that you learn, that's the stuff that needs to be instilled at a young age, stuff that's going to last you forever. And even fitness, like my approach in here at this gym that we've talked about it before, the approach is to get kids to have these positive training environments so that kids, when they are done, say they go to college and they're like, they're not playing a sport in college anymore. You still want them to have that habit and routine of going to the gym, hitting some good exercises, and then going home. Like that, those are the kind of things that we try to instill, because then if they do it in college, they'll do it hopefully after college, and so on and so forth throughout the rest of their life. One cool thing that he did in this video is that in this little training series is he, we look at, say, 8-year-old kids, 9-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids. They're starting to play on full fields for soccer. So what they did is they found a bunch of soccer coaches. They had this little British girl. I forget where they did this, but this girl had a super cute accent, and she got these coaches to play on a field equivalent to the size of a field. Say it was a 10-year-old playing on a full-size field. They just made the fields huge. They made the goals huge, and made these adults play on these fields. These coaches play on these huge, wide open fields where, they couldn't even complete passes across the whole way. The goalie's punting the ball out, and it's going like not even halfway to midfield. So much spacing. Some of the people just, they talked to the coaches after the game, and it's like, I just felt lost. I didn't feel in the game. I didn't get a lot of touches. They were kind of bored with it and not totally engaged with the activity that they were performing. And these are grown adults who coach soccer, so you would assume that they love the sport. Now, you start thinking about a 10-year-old that might just find it a little bit fun, or, has a shorter attention span, and they're like over in the corner kicking grass, picking flowers, and all that other stuff. So their focus would be, cut the field down, let these kids play, let them get more touches. Touches are important. Let them get more touches. Let them see these passing lanes a little bit differently, and let them play in a tighter area, and it's probably going to help develop their skill later down the road. I think that was one of these qualities that Brazil had when they play this game futsal, where it was using a heavier ball, and it was just tighter passing windows, and they were able to get had better control, better foot skills, all this other stuff because of that game, that they were able to extrapolate that to larger fields as they got older. So that was one cool thing, One of these coaches said too about they did it with hockey as well with the huge rink. One of the coaches said the surface is too big to learn on. So these kids are just not able to learn because it's just not the size of the field is not conducive to developing them as a child, as an athlete. Sorry. I know he talks about some of the key aspects of coaching the 6-year-olds. In caps, underline, exclamation points, whatever. None. There are no key aspects. All right. Well, in terms of developing practice schedules and whatnot, the key aspects are to have some fun, have some free play, don't put too much pressure on them, teach them good quality skills, get a bunch of balls involved in practice, get everybody touching, keep everybody engaged. That's where the focus should be, not like going 11-0, 12-0 when you're coaching 6-year-olds. And when we talk about play, when we talk about free play with kids and stuff like that, that means no coaches or coaching. So if you are a coach, and I've coached for 10 years, coaches tend to be micromanagers. So if you are a coach, it's time to just pump the brakes on micromanaging everything. If it's playtime, if it's free play, let the kids go out and explore. It's like that sandlot football game, it's street basketball, it's street hockey. You go out there with friends and you try stuff that you'll never try at practice if you have a coach breathing down your neck. But when you're out there with some buddies, you're willing to take a chance and try a new move out, stuff like that. That's kind of what we're missing and what we're lacking here a little bit, is that free play. We always have a parent, we always have a coach kind of micromanaging or just managing in general, and putting a little bit too much pressure on the kids and not allowing these kids to explore their bodies and explore different skills. One thing too that he brings up a lot is, this is a great quote. Joe Ehrman wrote a book. This is Joe Ehrman saying, parenting is the world's most competitive sport. Mike Boyle added in, and most of the competitors are idiots. Now, Mike Boyle's a little bit more soundbite worthy than just the Joe Ehrman one. Parents, we're super competitive. I'm a parent. I get it. We just spent some time in the hospital with our daughter. She swallowed a small piece of walnut. Next thing you know, she's coughing, hacking things up. She might have had this thing blocking an airway. We're like, what the hell is going on? So me as a parent, you kind of feel like a dummy. You're like, should I not have let her chomp on a walnut? She's been eating them before. She likes them. She was hungry. She was calling for them, pointing at them, whatever. So, you gave her like 1/8, if you have the full half, or like the full brain-like thing, it was maybe a quarter of that. I mean, maybe a quarter will go away. So you feel like an idiot, and I'm just being a parent like, God. So you don't even want to tell people some of these things because everybody's just so judgmental and everybody's kind of competing and, oh, you can't do that. Like, you get everybody throwing in their 2 cents. And anyway, Mike Boyle saying most of the competitors in this coaching kids, unfortunately, most of the parents are idiots. I don't want to say that he's wrong. There's a high percentage of people that are just kind of doing it wrong. And, I might go to a youth football playoff game tomorrow, 3 games going on. If you want to see some coaches acting like fools, go watch some youth football on the weekend, especially, now that it's playoff time. And it's like, apparently this means something if your 10-year-old team is going to win in the first round. I don't know. But why am I going? I coach some kids. I know some of the families. I want to go see some of these kids in action because I missed a game all year. But anyway, it just drives me nuts anyway when I end up going because coaches and stuff, the adults there, the grown-ups, the mature ones, are the ones that make these things not too fun. All right, so, one thing that he does talk about is kids aren't miniature adults. The road to success as an adult, you got to educate yourself. You're going to have long hours maybe at work. You're going to really have to focus. For kids, we cannot have 9-year-olds follow that same protocol. Things should be fun. The hours should be short and meaningful. Later specialization and stuff should work, and they should have a passion for what they're doing. The adult path and the child path are typically opposites. You're going to find some of those kids that you're going to have to fight on this a little bit like that. But for the most part, I think kids would be willing and accepting of having fun, having shorter practices, playing multiple things, and having passion for the sport. And kind of what I was touching on too with this whole parenting thing, you want to prepare the child for the path and not the path for the child. So you don't want to remove barriers. You don't want to remove a bunch of obstacles. You don't want to put your kid on the greatest team ever so that you can go 40-0. Consistent success at a young age is probably going to lead to some long-term failure. There's this like early succeeders phenomenon where, I've coached those kids where it's like that kid that was an awesome wrestler in 5th grade, 6th grade, won the league championship, all of a sudden just kind of disappeared because at the time he might have been more mature than everybody, a little bit stronger than everybody, and instead of relying on technique and learning good skills, he was like, I'm just going to muscle everybody and bulldoze everybody. And he did that. But eventually having that lack of skills, lack of technique catches up to you. Kids start to mature. Instead of being up here in the maturation process here, your maturity slows down a bit. This person goes a little faster. Now we're closer. This guy has better skill. He might beat you on the mat. Football. There's always a kid in youth football that's faster than everybody. You give him the ball and he's going to run right out to the outside or run right by everybody, and that's that. That's a wrap, touchdown. That kid, if he doesn't develop the right skills to play the position as he gets older, he's either going to have to work harder and learn these skills at an older age, or he's going to get passed by that backup that kind of outworks him. Being an early succeeder, you might not always have that work ethic to practice hard and to be a good teammate, things like that, because things come easy for you. So, going 40-0 is not a good learning experience. This is Mike Boyle talking. You want them to be successful, but you also want them to fail. You want them to cry. The long road of ups and downs gets you to the right road in the end. It's okay to lose a football game or a basketball game or whatever. You see a kid lose a tough wrestling match and he goes and cries. That's okay. They need to learn about this stuff. They need to learn that feeling these emotions is okay. You're never going to win everything in life. So, if you could get some experience and get some practice with failure at a young age, it's just going to help you down the road as you get older. All right. Don't give them the best of everything just because you can. Don't give them what you didn't get. Give them what you got. So there's a lot of parents. I worked with this guy a couple years ago in Easton. This guy worked his butt off to give his 3 kids every opportunity they wanted, whether it was wrestling camps, field hockey camps, training with me, anything else, football camps, all this stuff they were going to, these 3 kids. And that he literally just sat there and I didn't have this opportunity growing up, and that's his reason. It's hard to kind of argue with that. But that man with that work ethic, he's not who he is today if he didn't have those experiences. And he's kind of robbing his kids of having those same experiences because he's given them everything. He's not making them have these, tough roads as a young kid. He's letting them go to all these camps. And, it just kind of builds up to this, this entitled thing where these kids don't have the right, I kind of hate using that word, so I wish I didn't, but they just aren't able to develop the right skills mentally, the hard work, the ability that, hey, you're not always going to get what you want. There's going to be kids out there that are going to have more opportunities than you. There's only one thing you can control, and that's your effort and how you view things and your mindset. Are you going to work hard and all that stuff? So don't give them the best of everything just because you can. Give them what you got. If you had a tough upbringing and that made you a great person as an adult, try to replicate that a little bit for your kids. Obviously, you might have a bigger house, more comfortable. You don't have to worry about not paying the bills like, say, your parents did. But you still want to kind of replicate some of those hardships so your kids kind of appreciate the value of $1 and don't expect you to take them to every camp and don't expect you to give them a ride to every single game. And, don't expect them to let you go on the select team that costs a bunch of money. Most of the time, those select teams are selecting you because you got a fat wallet and deep pockets, and they just want your cash. All right, and speaking of those guys that want some money, these club coaches, these guys are entrepreneurs, man. They know how to hustle a little bit, and they're able to make some money doing the one thing that, they're just able to make some money, and they're using sports and athletics, and they're actually robbing parents. Ignorant almost a little bit. These parents are ignorant to what really is the best way to do it. They're selling them a bill of goods, and that bill of goods is fear. Fear that this kid next door is going to pass your son by or your daughter by if they don't sign up for your team. Or, hey, that girl on that championship team, she played for us all year round. Or this guy right here, he wrestles all year round. He goes to this club. He was at the Olympic Training Center. You think he would have been there if he was playing football in the fall? You think this kid would have been there if he was running track in the spring? No, he was in the wrestling room. Stuff like that. You hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. But I'm kind of, so you got to be careful with it. Some of these coaches are expert salesmen, and back in the day, you would have that coach. People talk about 3-sport athletes disappearing. There used to be those 3-sport coaches where each season they coach a different sport. Now these coaches are just coaching one sport. So what are they going to say? Their focus is going to be on that one sport, and they're going to want you in the weight room with that team. They're going to want you to not play other sports because they want you. They're selfish. They think that having you around under their wing because they feel they're some sort of great coach and great advisor that they're going to get you and get the team to winning championships. So beware of those club coaches, those entrepreneurs, those slick talkers. They're trying to sell you a bill of goods, and that bill of goods is fear, and it's no good. All right, back to the story here. We talked about some of these things with Boyle. Just kind of circle back to some of these things about talent. Is that the real indicator of future success at a young age? Probably not. It's developing skills like grit. When things get tough, how are you going to handle that situation? Talking about the early succeeders again, something we already talked about. Because they're the superstar at a young age, they might not always be the greatest teammate. And going back to how we open this thing, talking about some of these things that sports teach you, you're learning life skills in an environment at a young age, in a forgiving environment at a young age. But if you're one of these early succeeders, you're not having that adversity. You don't have to show your grit in any of these circumstances because you're smoking everybody. And, because you feel like that, you might get a little ego and you might not be the greatest of teammate. And if you don't get that teammate thing figured out, you're probably going to struggle through adulthood as well because you're going to have to work with others at some point in your life, no matter what you do. The next thing Mike Boyle gets in is a relative age effect. He jokingly says this, his son was born less than a month before the new year, which in January. And when you look at the NHL, 8 to 10% of, sorry, I'm trying to navigate what I wrote down here. My handwriting's a little bit crappy. So with the relative age effect, this is from the book Outliers with Malcolm Gladwell talking about the NHL. Mike Boyle's son plays hockey. 53% of them are born in January and March. 20% of the athletes are born in between April and June. 19% July to September. 8% October to December. So Mike Boyle had his son in December, and they jokingly said that, man, boy, did we have him at the wrong time. And his son was like, man, I would be a great, he was maybe born in 04. He's like, man, Dad, I'd be a good 05er right now, meaning if 05 was his birth year, he'd be good because he's always the youngest kid. And when you're the youngest kid, you're not going to mature as fast as the others. So with this relative age effect, you know, if you're born in January, you're potentially getting, if you're 10 years old, say, and you're born in January, you're potentially getting 25% more playing experience if your kid is 10 and starts playing at the age of 6. So because of that cutoff, they could play a little bit earlier. Or they could play when they're younger in their birth year because it's right away. So that means they get an extra year out of it and they get more playing time out of it. You know, they'll also, because they are starting at that age, when you have a kid January of 05 born, December of 05 born, the January kid is going to be 11 months roughly, a little bit more, 11 months older. So at that age, there's a huge difference in maturity in terms of speed, strength, decision making between somebody that is 10 and somebody that's almost 11, or somebody that's 8 and somebody that's almost 9. So those kids, that relative age effect does matter in a sense that they might be successful, a little bit more physically mature. They might get better coaching then because they are better, that they might make that team that has the better coach. They might get more ice time, yada, yada, yada. They won't sit on the bench, all of these things. It is a factor. But then on the flip side too, Mike Boyle's like, don't sleep on these late bloomers. And, you know, he talked about those kids, sorry about that. Not the kids, the issues potentially with that early succeeders phenomenon, things of that nature. So we got to be careful and not like rule your kid out. Hey, you know, he's born in December. He's just not going to be a great hockey player. You know, he's just going to miss those cutoff years. You know, I heard this guy in a coffee shop, and I was just listening to him. Like, I kind of felt like, anyway, I thought the dude was kind of an idiot. All right, he's talking about his 2 kids that are in daycare. How old are you in daycare? 4, 3, 5, maybe max? And he's like, yeah, I got my daughter pegged as a volleyball player. She's got big feet. You know, big feet, they're an indicator of height. So, you know, I got her pegged as a volleyball player. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm 5'8" with a size 12 foot. I don't think shoe size is an indicator of height. I'm a small dude. Actually, I'm not even 5'8". I'm 5'7" and some change. You know, anyhow, just beyond that, this dude's already pegging his daughter who's like 5 years old, maybe max, for a volleyball player. And I'm like, this is the problem. This is the problem with youth sports. Pegging kids for certain things, saying because they were born at this point in time, they might not play this sport, and yada, yada, yada. It's pretty stupid. Anyhow, same with those young, I mean, so Boyle goes into a whole different thing here then, and we talked about stratifying different things with different levels, different clubs and stuff like that, and cutting players, things like that, where it's like he says here, we drastically reduce the talent pool by stratifying too young. 13 to 14 is a fair age to start thinking about this. You know, when we start cutting kids at a young age and not letting kids play, we might miss out on that late bloomer situation. And there's tons of examples of, say, hockey players, Hall of Famers that are born in October and December, through December. So it's not like it's not possible to be a great player. You know, the tortoise does beat the hare sometimes over the long haul. So even if you are that late bloomer, you still might pass that guy or girl you might pass that guy or girl in whatever sport you're doing. And one of the best ways to kind of overcome this is to not try out for those teams that you get cut on. So you don't go out for that team where they stratify and they might cut you. If you want to overcome that relative age effect, you have to pick the right team. And in order to do that, you have to pick a team that's going to be good for your skill set, playing against comparable talent, and stuff that's going to get you on the court or the ice or whatever, or the field, whatever sport you may play. That's how you overcome it. And then just Johan Falby's, this guy that kind of developed long-term athletic development. As many as possible, referring to kids, as many as possible, as long as possible, in the best possible environment. That's how you overcome the relative age effect. Don't cut kids, don't stratify, keep them all out for the team, and try to develop them for the long haul, not just for your short-sighted season that is coming up now. We're talking about long-term development, all right? Long-term athletic development is training methods alongside a greater scientific basis for children and adolescents. You know, one thing that is troublesome is that kids aren't as active as they used to be, and I think that kind of develops their brain in a negative way. I remember reading or seeing something or listening. I think it was Jordan Peterson was talking about rats and the prefrontal cortex of rats not being fully developed if they're not able to play. And I think you could extrapolate that out to humans a little bit like that, where if kids aren't out jumping, doing these proprioceptive things, running, jumping, sprinting, throwing, climbing, monkey bars, balance beams, standing on one leg, jumping rope, hopscotch, or whatever these kids are doing. If you're not doing that, I think it's going to affect your brain development for the negative. So it's important to get out there and explore, not only in the classroom, but also with your physical movements, physical literacy. He gets into this 10,000 hours thing. Malcolm Gladwell hit it in Outliers. 10,000 hours has little merit, in Mike Boyle's opinion, and I agree. 10,000 hours has very little merit if applied literally to sport. So basically what he's saying is, spent a night sleeping in a hospital with the bed was about this wide and this long. I got about 4 hours of sleep. This was 2 nights ago, and I'm still trying to shake off the cobwebs, so excuse my yawning and my coffee drinking here. Anyhow, 10,000 hours, very little merit if applied literally to sports. Then, you start talking about things, deliberate practice and all this other stuff, and it is super important. Deliberate practice, right? Not playing games all the time. Hey, occasionally as a coach, you're going to have to bring them all in and say, hey, this is the skill we're working on. This is the way we're going to set it up. It is going to be structured. We need to get better at this here. That is deliberate practice, right? There needs to be a free play component where they are out working on their own. Hey, I'm going to work on my free throws. Or, you see those kids not even back in the day. There's kids out there that are working on layups with their left hand, say, on a basketball court one day, or taking a bunch of shots on the net for hockey or lacrosse. We got lacrosse nets out in the backyards up here. Kids are whipping shots at goals. They're getting out there and they're just getting some practice in with some of the basic stuff. Not too much pressure, 100 shots, 200 shots, 50 shots, whatever it is. They're getting the reps up. Things that they learn at practice that week, they're probably practicing that a little bit. So yeah, having some deliberate practice is important. A 10,000 hour thing. Mastering one sport might take 5,000 hours, whereas in another thing it might take 14,000 hours or 22,000. That 10,000 hour thing was just an average of a bunch of things covering a wide range of activities. Chess, piano, who knows, some guy, you could search this online, some guys try to apply this concept to becoming a professional golfer and just trained all day, and it didn't end well for him. He's gotten pretty good, and I haven't checked out an update in a couple years, but I think he almost quit on the idea and just realized it wasn't going to happen. So that is that. And one of the important things too with this deliberate practice idea and this 10,000 hour idea is that people saw that and they said, hey, we're just going to play one sport because at 10,000 hours, I'm just going to play basketball year round. But really a sport like lacrosse that I was saying, or soccer in the fall, maybe both. Maybe you play soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, lacrosse in the spring. There's passing lanes, right, in all three sports. So you are getting practice. You are getting deliberate practice. It doesn't, like your basketball deliberate practice doesn't have to mean you have to shoot free throws all day, every day. You could get that practice in by playing other sports. There's passing lanes in those sports. There's there's being in a good athletic defensive stance, shuffling, sliding, crossing over, teaming up and playing defense with a teammate. You could get practice in that way too. It doesn't just have to be in that specific sport. All right. Getting into some other stuff here. Training to train. This is one of these things here where, Mike Boyle recommends that he doesn't want kids in his gym, really, males, until they're basically till like 11, right? Boys and girls. Around the ages of 12 to 16 for males, they might, and really similar for females, 11 to 15, just because they mature a little quicker. You're probably going to have to choose two sports. You don't have to, but there's only so much time in the day. And Mike Boyle's opinion is he wants the athletes training twice a week at his gym while they play their other sports. But if you're playing 3 sports and some of these sports run for 3/4 of the year, it's hard to just rationalize, or not rationalize, but schedule time for everything. So that being said, around that age, it might be best to start whittling some sports down. Maybe you play 2 sports. And then you start focusing on strength and conditioning a little bit, learning the basic moves. Because with this learning to train component, it's going to happen whether or not you're 12 or 16. You're going to have to learn these moves. You're going to have to learn how to squat. You're going to have to learn how to jump properly. You're going to learn how to do a chin-up. You're going to have to learn how to press weights. So it's best to learn that when you're around 11 years old. Boyle doesn't want anybody in his gym till he's 11. I'm a little bit lenient. We do some other stuff for some of the young kids. I'll take anybody if they want to come in and work out, and we'll figure something out. But for his setup, for his sake, his environment, he's like, you know what, and this is like a college weight room setting almost. I don't want anybody in there until they're 11. But anyhow, learning this stuff at a young age is just going to help you out. So if you're a male at 12 years old, you didn't quite mature yet. Once you do hit puberty, once you do start maturing, you don't have to spend time at that point learning all of these exercises. You already got it. So you could just be going full steam ahead with everything and learn some of the more complex lifts like hang cleans and stuff like that. So those parents, when should my kids start weight training? I guess a safe age would be 11. You could exercise before that, obviously, and you could climb ropes and jump, run around, sprint, throw medicine balls, things like that. Stand on one leg, work some balance, work maybe some body weight exercises, whatever you want to do. Kids could work out younger, much younger than that. But, to start learning some of these technical lifts like a hang clean, how to squat properly, Mike Boyle's opinion, it's probably best to wait to the age of 11. Now he goes back to early specialization. What's the single biggest problem with it? It doesn't work. Anyone who tells you to specialize is either dumb, selfish, financially motivated, or worse, all three. So we talked about those club coaches earlier. I don't want to say they're dumb, but I will say they got two of the three covered. Selfish, they want you on their team, and they're financially motivated. You're writing checks for them. That's the problem with early specialization. And then another issue with it is there's examples like Tiger Woods, and then these parents see it. The crowd sees it. Your teammate or that family over there that's dominating, you see them going to all these things. Their 9-year-old kid is tearing up the soccer field. You're like, crap, I got to start doing this stuff. But really, the data doesn't support early specialization. The data doesn't support Tiger Woods. There's so many parents out there that are trying to do this now. They got little Tiger when he's like 2, hitting some clubs out and you're like, dang, he's the greatest of all time. Maybe if I followed that, I would do that too. But that guy's an outlier. He's not the rule. He's the exception. That being said, early specialization doesn't work, all right? Now, I talked about this playoff game I might check out tomorrow. Mike Boyle, this is a quote. Youth football, I think they corner the market in stupidity. Totally age inappropriate. Coaches who don't know what they're doing. Friday Night Tykes, I think, is the show. He showed a clip from that video. This one kid just laid a kid out bad. And the coach on the kid's team that laid the big hit is like, woo-hoo, yeah, baby, that's how we do it. I'm like, these kids are like 7. I remember a kid getting picked up here once in a car seat. And I'm like, this kid plays tackle football? He's in a freaking car seat. So he's like, he's got to sit in a car seat, but yet he could go out there and just hit and get his head jammed back this way or fall over and smack his head off the ground, things like that. The more and more I think about football, and I coached this sport for 10 years in the high school level, I think it can go back to just being, not go back. I think it should maybe just be flag football. And it's like people think, oh, they're going to be behind. They're not going to learn how to tackle. It's like bull crap. They're going to learn angles and all this other stuff. They'll be able to figure it out pretty quick once they get to that, 6th, 7th, 8th grade level where they're in middle school now, and they could probably play tackle football then. And there's a big issue in my area anyway with numbers in middle school. And I think that could possibly potentially positively impact it. Potentially positively impact it, right? That makes sense. So you get more kids playing flag, get more kids participating. Parents aren't going to worry about the contact at a young age. These kids get to middle school. Maybe that parent is comfortable with their kid tackling now. Whereas and then, if they're a 3rd grader, you're like, I just don't want them playing football. That kid might forget about the sport. But if you could get them interested and get them out for the sport of football at a young age, keep them safe, not worry about them smacking heads, not worry about coaches teaching a skill like tackling that don't have a clue about it. If you could avoid that at a young age, you might be able to get participation up at the middle school level, and then that would hopefully work its way up to the high school level. That's going to be my thought on that subject. It literally just popped into my brain right now about not letting tackling occur, and it might actually be a positive thing for And it might be a positive thing to help our numbers out here. It'll get more kids out at the youth level because parents don't have to worry about the injuries. Kids don't have to worry about getting these terrible injuries at a young age. And then once they mature a little bit and they become a middle school athlete, who knows? They want to learn how to tackle, then things will be better. And hopefully, because they're paid positions at most of these schools, that they could get coaches that actually know how to teach it, know how to tackle, and they put the kids first and not are out there teaching terrible things like on that show Friday Night Tykes, where you get a total idiot going nuts because his 9-year-old just laid out another kid and that kid's on the ground not moving. Stupid, man. Then we got TV stations covering this stuff too. I don't get it. I'm angry, but rant over. Then he brought something else up too, man. 20 years from now, picture yourself telling someone you played in the Little League World Series. Nobody will care. So ESPN talking about TVs covering this stuff. ESPN covering the Little League World Series. Wanting your kid to be in that big national spotlight. It's like, nobody's going to care about that when you're older, guys. Doesn't matter. It's still a Little League baseball game. Yeah, it's cool if you win the title. Yeah, it's cool if you're the PA champ. Yeah, it's cool if you're the USA champ. Yeah, it's cool if you just beat Japan and are the World Series champs. But really, all this stuff's not going to matter if you don't become a good, functioning, healthy adult, all right? We talked about practice time, or he talks about practice time, and I just had this talk with a guy that played Division I basketball. His kids play basketball. He's coaching now. Frank and I discussed this in the past. Do you want your kid on the court, or do you want him on the bench during games? He or she. He said you got to get on the court. You can't sit on the bench. All that stuff that you practice in practice, you got to practice it in full speed situations, and that's games. So, he took a look at the Olympics from like 2008 maybe. Joe Sakic, great player, by the way, probably Hall of Famer. He had the puck for 1 minute, 19 seconds in a 60-minute game. He was the leader in terms of controlling the puck. If you do this for any sport, it's probably the same. So, at practice, how many pucks do you have in one hockey game? One. How many pucks can you use at practice? As many as you want. That's Mike Boyle's thing. It goes for any sport. Same with football, man, or same with basketball. You could get these kids practicing skills in practice. That's where it's important. It's not these games all the time. Learn skills in the practice room, man. Talks about Terrell Davis, Super Bowl MVP, awesome running back. His rookie year, that preseason game, he's out covering kicks on the special teams. Then I think he was an undrafted running back playing special teams just to make the team. Next thing you know, he's winning Super Bowls and he's in the Hall of Fame. Awesome story. He didn't play football until his junior year in high school. Nearly 90% of the NFL draft plays multiple sports. These guys are probably the best athletes in the world. And, because they're the best, there's that thing where it's like, well, of course he's going to be a good sprinter. He's an NFL running back. So it's like a chicken or the egg situation. Is he a great sprinter because he's a good football player, or is he a good football player because he's a good sprinter? Who knows? The guy's a great athlete. He has a large skill set because he's playing all of these different sports. All of these different sports, like we talked about, they apply to whatever sport that you decide to specialize in. You can't take a situation where there's a lack of opportunities and apply them to the United States. It's the only sport, so you talk about the Dominicans in baseball, you talk about Brazil in soccer. The best athletes in those countries are going to play those sports. It's the only sport that they play. All the best athletes are going to play that sport. So the best athletes in the Dominican are probably playing baseball. The best athletes in soccer, in Brazil, they're playing soccer. So it's like you can't say that. You can't almost follow that approach and saying that those guys specialize. They do, but that's because there's a lack of opportunities in those countries as well, whereas in America, we don't have that. So we can't try to be like that great Cuban baseball player or Mariano Rivera talking about how he used a cardboard glove. That's all he had. That was the only opportunities that they had to play something, and they played it, and he became an outlier and one of the greatest of all time. Talked about playing two sports and strength training. In a great facility is probably all a college-bound athlete could handle optimally. Your focus is going to narrow in high school. Kids between the ages of 6 and 12, they must play multiple sports with distinct off-seasons. Don't play all year round. Give them a break from stuff. Boyle goes back into the stunted growth. People in the weight room say, there's parents that think weightlifting is going to affect your height. where did this come from? And he speculates here, but 1970 study on Japanese child labor, they saw that these people that did hard labor were shorter than other Japanese people, so they started to apply that concept to strength training and resistance training and how it might affect you. Kids getting hurt, right? Mike Boyle, non-traumatic injuries should be a huge red flag. Kids should not have these non-traumatic injuries, meaning non-contact injuries, ligaments, muscles, things like that. These little nagging pains, the hamstring soreness, whatever. People ask, hey, how do I recover from this? Stop playing. That's his idea. Stop is the solution. Rest until it doesn't hurt. Nothing is that important if your 12-year-old can't play. They should not be playing hurt, guys. So if your son or daughter has a non-traumatic injury, pump the brakes, man. Take some time off. Let them heal. Let them recover. Take a month off, 6 weeks off, whatever it is. 6 weeks is a short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. Let them recover. Now we talk about parental responsibilities a little bit. He gives some advice to parents where we only we only exercise our parental responsibility when it's convenient. Sometimes as parents, if we see something going on that we don't agree with, we should step in there and say something. You can't say, I don't want my kid to drink soda, so you're restricting them there, but then allowing them to only specialize in one sport if you think it's not good for them. So if you're gonna have some parental control on one thing but not the other, it doesn't work that way. You shouldn't just do it when it's convenient. If the data suggests the well-being of your child should be playing multiple sports, doing multiple activities, you should step in and you should step up and tell your kid, hey, you're going to do this, all right? I'm your parent. I know what's best for you. Another thing, man, my boy Frank here got in a great argument. Not an argument. He was lecturing a client of mine, a friend of mine. She was getting her daughter involved in cross country, and I just sent him this article from Mike Boyle a while ago, but basically it's summed up like this. The perfect prescription is suck, run slow for long periods of time. So if you want your child to be non-explosive, get them running long distances at a young age. It's going to change those. There's muscle fibers you have that are kind of intermediate. You have these slow twitch, you have some fast twitch, and then you have some stuff in the middle. And these ones in the middle could go either this way or that way in terms of how fast they're going to be contracting. So one way to get those muscles to be fast twitch muscles is to train fast. If you want them to be a slow twitch, train slow. Run for long periods of time. Don't do the sprint work. Don't do the explosive work. Don't do the jumps, the throws, the bounds, the skips, all that stuff. So if you want these kids to be, these kids are going to get conditioning with their sports. They're running around like crazy. They're practicing all the time. They're playing games all the time. They got the conditioning thing taken care of. The best thing to do for these kids at a youngish age, 10, 11, 12, 13, train them to be more explosive. The conditioning will come with their sports. They're practicing whatever. Their practice coaches probably got them over conditioned anyway. So just focus on being explosive in the weight room and with your training. Like we talked about with the parental control, or going back to that, going back to what I just said too, there's a genetic component to everything that we do. So it's our job to understand that as a parent or a coach. There's genetics and there's environment. Optimizing that is the ultimate combination. We want to maximize our physical genetic potential, right? I can't run like Usain Bolt, but I could work, but I could get my genetic, I could get close to my potential, close to that, get the most out of me possible. And I could also have this great positive environment. The environment thing we could control, getting the most out of a kid or an athlete. We also can control that as a coach. And that's kind of our job, is just to bring it out of them. With the parental control stuff, he goes about it, I don't care, in quotes. That's the best answer you could give your kid if they want to play one sport. You're the parent, you can make them do other things. I agree with that. There's this whole phenomenon about body weight exercising with kids and how this is going to be good for them. But, there's only body weight exercises are pretty much about as regressed you could get. So as an 11 or 12-year-old, you can't have these rules saying, hey, we're body weight only here, because this kid might be able to handle a little bit more. So you're really just holding them back. If they're showing efficient movement skills, that you could always progress this stuff with kids, and they could use weights. They could learn a goblet squat where they're holding it here. You don't have to load their spine up with a barbell, but just doing body weight squats over and over again, you're probably, one, that kid's probably going to get bored, and two, you might not be able, you're slowing down their learning process too a little bit. Being able to squat with a load, that's going to be important. It's going to translate down the road. So like we said earlier, Mike Boyle, how do we get better? 2 days of strength training, 2 to 3 hours of skill work, and limit the games. If you have a child, I'll repeat that. If you have a child, say 10 and above, how do you want them to get better? 2 to 3 hours of skill work a week, 2 strength training sessions, and limit the games, which means more practice time. More practice, limit the games. Games are good for the good kids, right? But they're not great for those late bloomers, so to speak. He talks about skill here, and once you're 14 years old, your skill, and I don't remember where he got this data from, but he says your skill only changes 10 to 20% after the age of 14. Developing strength is going to maximize that skill, so you have that range, 10 to 20%, basically 0 to 20%. Your skill could stay the same or it could get up to 20% better. And the only way to get 20% better is if you really try to tap in and you try to get stronger, you try to get more explosive, you try to get a little bit faster, you try to get a little bit more agile, you try to throw that thing a little bit further. That's how you do it. He says this here, man, you want your kid to play in college, speed and size. Those are the things. Genetics are important, obviously, in the size factor. And if you don't have the size, you better have the speed. And if you don't have the speed, you better have some size. But put those two things together, and that's a wonderful combo. You look at Division III athletes, you look at Division I athletes. That's probably the separation, that combination of speed and size. You look at football, that 5'7" quarterback that's all state, or Allen Iverson, for example, used to play quarterback, 150 pounds probably. He wasn't going to the NFL, but he could freaking play some point guard, I'll tell you that. So, he didn't have that size component, but he had the speed to do that other stuff in another court. Sorry, he had the speed, not the size. You can't play in the NFL at 155 pounds. So that's going to weed you out. With his strength training program, and I ran into this problem too with preparing kids for sport at a public high school. Kids are always in season, so to speak. They're always doing something. So you can't have this periodization where you're leading up to a season because they're always kind of in season. So you just got to strength train 2-3 times a week. You got to get them doing things. You just got to get them better at all the good full body, big bang exercises. You want to find improvements in that stuff. Like I said too, it takes a year or two to teach kids how to train before they really start seeing great results. So you do that at the age of 10, 11, 12. Teach that stuff at that age. They're going to get some results, but it's going to be minimal. Once they start maturing, once they start hitting puberty, that's when those gains with a Z at the end, they're going to start coming through. Great quote here. I don't even remember where this was from. The best time to plant a tree is 5 years ago. The second best time is right now. So if you got a 15-year-old kid and you're like, damn it, I wish I would have started them at 11, you didn't. It's over with. Start them right now. Get them up to speed if you can. Dan John, shout out again. If I don't mention Dan John or Mike Boyle on a podcast, it's not a podcast. Dan John's opinion on kids working out. Learn the movement first, add volume second, add load third. All right, those are his 3 keys. Volume is the amount of work you do, 100 reps of something at a moderate weight. Load would be 25 reps at a really hard weight. Like we talked about already, you can make kids slower just like you can make them faster. One thing that Mike Boyle's learned, and that I kind of like this as well, less structure. You have to let stuff go sometimes, and you can't be so rigid. Say for example, there's some lifts that the greatest lifters of all time, the world-class guys, they only consider themselves 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10. I can't be a stickler with a 12-year-old kid because his squat doesn't look like those guys. What I have to do is just get that movement to look good enough, teach it to be good enough, and then keep refining it over and over and over again each time they perform that movement. So they might be a 5 out of 10 that first year or two. Then it becomes 6, 7, 8 out of 10. Next thing you know, they're squatting and it looks pretty damn good. that kind of applies to everything. Even some of this other, even some of the other stuff that you do, the agility drills, things like that, the start positions. You want them to run fast. You could refine some of this other stuff. We don't want to nitpick that 9, 10, 11-year-old because it's going to turn them off to training. If you want to fail training kids, nitpick. Mike Boyle said it. I've had that same kind of thought process, same kind of opinion. Some parents don't like that. They want their kids to be nitpicked. They want everything to look perfect. But really, we got to kind of take the pressure off them a bit. And it's going to look a little sloppy at times, and that's okay. We're going to work around it. We're going to keep getting a little bit better. Talking more does not make learning occur. You have to be clear and concise with your advice and your tips. A great quote here from Tom Brady's coach out in California. I forget this man's name, something Martinez, I believe. Training has to be a mix of shit and ice cream. You have to know who you're dealing with. Some kids that come in here, they come from some great privileged lives, and they're dealt ice cream every day. And it's okay to kind of give them a little bit of shit every so often. And then there's kids that come from a shit environment or a shitty house, and they come in here and they just live in constant shit. You need to give them a little bit of ice cream, and you might want to be a little bit more patient with them. And I don't want to say coddle them a little bit, but you got to understand where they're coming from. And you might have different rules for kids in different situations based off of their home life and their environment they came up with. Different strokes for different folks, man. That's what an old wrestling coach used to tell me. There's going to be different rules for kids, and it's okay. Big Four. The Big Four, right? This is what he's talking about in terms of the weight room. And this is why it's important for him to not start kids to the age of 11. The hang clean, it's pretty technical, all right? It's an Olympic lift, so to speak. Some people don't even teach this stuff. I'm a big fan of the exercise. So is Mike Boyle. The goblet squat. We talked about it earlier. Cradling the weight in there, hitting a deep squat, learning how to squat with a little bit of a load. The bench press. Ultimate exercise to kind of load up the upper body. Push-ups are awesome, but some kids are just going to be able to bang them out. Others are going to need work in that area. The bench press is a way to overload the body, start moving some weights. Plus, every dude, and some girls, they want to do it too, for sure. But most dudes that come in here, they're like, man, I want to bench press. Let them bench press. And then the chin up, man. These are just the basic learning patterns, basic motor learning, really. If we're able to master these skills at age 11 or 12, once we get older, once we start maturing, we're going to be able to jack the weights up. And these are the Big Four that he hits, these Big Four, he's starting to teach them at a young age. So, like we were saying earlier, some of the key points here, I think, as we start to kind of wrap this up a little bit, teach these lifts to kids 11 years old. Good. It's a good fair age. If they don't get it at 11, they're still going to have to get that learning phase at age 12, 14, 15, 16. So it's best to get it to them when they're young. Granted, Mike Boyle is a guy who has a business, and I have a business too. So I want these kids of course I want them to come in at age 11, because it is my business, and I want to profit off of that, I guess. But really, if you want to maximize your kids' potential, they need to be in the weight room. They need to be focused, and they need to be working on strength. Like we talked about, 10 to 20% difference. You could boost your skill 10 to 20% after the age of 14. One way to do that is by learning how to train at a youngish age and developing and maximizing those skill sets. And then for the most part here, what his training is, they're going to do a general warm-up, just some basic movements, some lunges, some kicks, some high knees, some butt kicks, some skips, things like that. Then they're going to do some medicine ball throws. They're going to do some jumps, and they're going to do some sprints. That's the start of every session. Jump, throw, sprint. Anybody could do that. You want to get better, you want to get more explosive, jump, throw, sprint. Then they get into those Big Four lifts that we were talking about. Probably do a little bit of sled work at the end. Bam, you got yourself a workout. Now, some of the stuff here, man. Mike Boyle's great. If you're a parent, if you're a coach, this thing's great for anybody. What we talk about here, man, let's take some of the pressure off the kids. Let's explore some free play. Let's let them learn some hard lessons at a young age. Life's not always going to be easy. Be careful of those select team coaches. Be careful of some of the clubs. They're selfish. They're probably not all of them. Some of these people are selfish, and they're just looking to fatten their pockets. They're looking out for themselves. Just remember that. Let's not rationalize away practice time. If you're in season and you coach a high school sport, they still should be strength training. You shouldn't take 30 minutes to get into the weight room. What's that? You're going to cut off a little bit of practice time. It's okay. Over the long haul, that's going to matter more. You're going to build some team camaraderie in the weight room. You're going to prevent injuries, things like that. Keep learning, keep improving fitness, and like I said, we got to have positive stuff with this. Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry, I had to take a little small break here. I had 2 people come into the gym, cut the last video off a little bit by accident. And one thing that I wanted to talk about here as we wrap this thing up a little bit, I didn't manage my time too well. I had a couple athletes coming in right as I was finishing recording. When we talk about training with kids here, obviously we talked about it a little bit earlier, talk about it just about every podcast. Got to have a good, positive training environment, right? We don't want to be so negative. We don't want to be a nitpicker. We don't want to be so harsh and critical of everything that's going on in a kid's life. Hey, that's not right. This isn't right. That's not right. You got to do this, that, and the other thing. They're going to be turned off by strength training. If they don't get that college scholarship they wanted, they might not play a sport again. If they have that negative relationship with training, they're probably not going to do it into adulthood. Then they're going to be like that 25-year-old person who's like, or 35 or 45, hey, I used to be able to bench press 350. And it's like, who cares? You're 100 pounds overweight right now. You're on blood pressure medicine, and you have trouble getting up off the ground. All that stuff doesn't matter. What matters here is just the way that we talked about it earlier. Doesn't matter. 10 years old, you don't want to be the best at 10. You don't want to be the best at 15. You don't want to be the best at 20, 25, 30. You just want to keep getting better as you get older. You want to look forward to moving on through life and not miserable, talking about how your back hurts or how you used to be able to do X, Y, Z. Or like some of those guys I used to coach with that used to be like, if I could, I would love to go back, man. One thing I miss the most, playing football. It's like, really, man? You got a kid. You've got grandchildren. You've got a loving wife, loving spouse, say. People care about you. And you would trade all that in just to play one more high school football game. It's like, really, dude? Priorities, a little messed up, I think. But anyhow, that's that, man. Mike Boyle, Complete Youth Training. He talks about all the good stuff. At least what I think is good stuff. Maybe it's selection bias a little bit. But anyway, I like the guy. He comes at you. He's been in the game for decades. Very honest, I think so. Very truthful. And just has he has the experience, and he has the... he has the credentials in the sense of people that he developed. Just in one, he talked about how his daughter, who's 18, 19 years old now, in college at one of the best hockey programs in the country. She was his test dummy a little bit with the long-term athletic approach, and he had her diving, he had her doing judo, he had her doing a lot of different stuff growing up. Granted, being around a weight room and all that probably helped as well. Having the resources to do stuff like that, I'm sure has helped. But he's like, this is a girl, we're going to try out everything, we're going to practice everything I preach her and see what happens. And it turned out to be a great thing. One story he had that was kind of crazy is that he had his daughter, I think she was 14. She's like, Dad, I just want to play hockey now. I don't want to play soccer anymore. He's like, just play one more year. He kind of made her play. She goes down, holding her knee like, He's like, crap, I think my daughter just tore her ACL, and it's my fault. Long story short, it was just an MCL, but stuff like that can happen. No matter how hard you train, no matter how hard you think some of the stuff you're doing is going to prevent injury, stuff is still going to happen. We could only control so much as strength and conditioning coaches. Accidents happen. You're watching the NFL. These guys train at such high levels. They're still going down with these devastating leg injuries and non-contact injuries, so to speak. So, there's only so much you can do now. This podcast, man, well, first off, Complete Youth Training, athletesacceleration.com. Get on the newsletters. They give out promos all the time. If you're a strength coach, I would buy some. Their resources are great. I would get in a loop there. If you need some continuing education stuff, they're kind of certified through most of the agencies. I'm with the NSCA. NSCA gives points towards continuing education. If you're a strength and conditioning coach, if you're a personal trainer, you need some continuing education stuff, great website to do that. And any of Mike Boyle's stuff, some of his books too, some of the original stuff, really molded things that I do in my methodology is developing athletes. And I'm not anything great or special, but I feel like the stuff that he does is the right way to do things, and it's a healthy way to do things. So I'm a big fan of what he does, whether it's his writing or his video programs. Now, this podcast here, it's available. You're watching now, so you're probably on YouTube. We're on Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, who knows where else, man, but it's out there and it's available. Tell your friends about it. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's one of my favorite topics to kind of study and discuss, kind of helping these developing youngsters, and just helping them, giving them a good positive training experience. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend. Fluck Podcast out. Peace, everybody.